My neighborhood sat right up against these old woods that used to give me the willies, and I wasn't the only one. All the neighborhood kids had their own myths and legends surrounding the place. Some swore there were werewolves hidden in the trees. Couldn't blame them, because if you got deep enough in there, it could seem like, well, nearly pitch black. Well before sundown, even. I had one friend that said a serial killer used to bury his victims out there. And another friend who used to tell us that a witch lived there and waited for children to wander inside and lose their way. She captured them and used them to make some horrific potions and spells. And when she was done with their husks, she'd pour their souls into a mason jar and put it up on a shelf. I didn't believe any of that, though. But when I turned 10, I met Evil Red. This would have been back in the summer of 1982. Like a lot of kids, I spent my summers roaming the streets and backwoods with my friends, riding our bikes into town to sneak into R-rated movies. And if we were feeling brave, we'd play in the woods. You know, like I said, everybody had their own boogeyman story about those woods. But the granddaddy of them all was the story of Evil Red. A lot of the kids I knew, well, the ones who knew this legend, and, you know, some of them heard it from their parents or grandparents, described Evil Red as a demon with a black head. His head was always described as misshapen and black and glistening with slime. The younger kids thought he was some kind of alien collecting specimens for some god-awful experiment. I guess that seemed plausible enough for our young minds. But Evil Red was a ghost. And I'll tell you how I know. So back in July of 82, we'd watched all the movies they were showing at the Lee Highway Cinema. I think the big movies that summer were Star Trek II and Poltergeist. And I think we might have even snuck in to see Porky's too. But whatever they were showing, we'd seen them all a dozen times. So we got bored. And when kids that age get bored, they're bound to get in trouble, right? We started to dare one another to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And we tried to one-up the last boy with every dare. One thing led to another, and my friend Bill asked me to go out into the woods to try and find Evil Red. My friend Jimmy, that was Bill's younger brother, thought that dare was going a little too far. And he had pity on me and tried to get Bill to dare me to do something else. But I had a reputation to maintain, so I accepted the dare. We rode our bikes to the outskirts of the woods and then dumped them in the grass. Jimmy and Bill watched from the edge of the woods as I disappeared among the trees. If anything from the stories about the woods were true, it's that it was dark. The trees were really huddled close to one another, so close that they formed a thick, like a thick canopy of branches and leaves overhead, blocking out just about all the light. The darkness wasn't the strangest part either. There were no animals, no birds, no squirrels. Didn't even seem like there were even bugs flying around. I could hear my friends taunting me from the distance and decided it was now or never. So I called out to Evil Red. You've heard of Bloody Mary or shit, even Candyman? You're supposed to call out their names 3 or 5 or however many times it is to summon them. And that day I just decided that that was the way to do it. I guess I also figured that they might call me a wuss or something if I just said his name once. But I called out for Evil Red 3 times, just for good measure. And you'll think I'm being corny, but I swear there's power in a name. When I spoke Evil Red's name a third time, it's like I felt the air shift. In the dead of summer, the air went ice cold. The spot in front of me seemed to shimmer, like twinkling lights piercing the spaces between the leaves or something. And then I blinked, and standing in front of me was the shape of a man, or ghost, spirit, whatever. It wore red from head to foot. I couldn't tell if this was its clothes or its red, wrinkled skin. Its head was black and rubbery, shiny like patent leather. I could hear it breathing, low and raspy, like its vocal cords had been shredded by broken glass or something. I stood frozen, unable to run back to my friends. There was a muffled sound, as if the ghost was trying to say something, but I couldn't make out what it was. Then it lunged towards me. This time I did scream, and then I ran like hell. I ran straight through the branches and sticker bushes, and I was pretty tore up when I made it out. I glanced over my shoulder only once, and saw Evil Red holding up his hands as if to say, "Whoa," or "hello," or maybe beckoning me to come back. I didn't know which. Didn't much care either. But before I could look back, his shape seemed to melt, as if the black of his face was dripping over his red body, and then the blackness of his figure seemed to dissipate, like smoke off a tire fire. I faced forward again and ran the rest of the way out of the woods. My two buddies were leaning against a shade tree in a clearing, waiting on me. They'd been smiling and laughing until they saw the state I was in. I must have been a sight. I was in something of a panic as I told them about what had happened. They didn't seem to believe me. Maybe they thought I was putting them on, playing a prank. I took them into the woods to the exact spot where Evil Red appeared to me. I don't know what I expected them to see. Proof that he'd been there? Maybe his footprints in the dirt? I don't know. But what's even crazier was that we did find something. About where I'd seen Evil Red melt and disappear were some words scrawled onto the side of a cardboard box that I hadn't noticed before. There were 4 words. The letters were red, and I wondered if Evil Red had written it in his own blood while he melted. The words he'd written were, "Don't cut it down." And then, without another word, or without even looking at my friends, I went back to my bike, hopped on it, and rode home. Dag, did it get colder in here? Okay, so I didn't speak to anyone about what I had seen for years. So maybe 1997, 1998, somewhere along there. I'd come back to town to visit family and ran into my old pal Jimmy. We met up for some beers at Hooters and reminisced about old times. Jimmy'd gotten a new job at this chemical plant built right over the old woods, and I was glad to hear they'd torn the woods down. Always gave me the creeps. We got to talking about my Evil Red sighting, and I refreshed his memory about all the things I saw. My memories of it have always been really vivid. Still are. We got to talking about that message written on the old cardboard box, don't cut it down. Over the years, I started to think that Evil Red might be the ghost of someone who'd committed suicide. Of course, that wouldn't explain his appearance. But, maybe Evil Red hanged himself from one of the trees in the woods. Maybe his message was a reference to someone cutting down his own body down from the tree. I told Jimmy that, and he shrugged and told me that was a stretch. And then he said, well, they did cut down the woods to build the plant. We just laughed it off. That was the last time I saw Jimmy. My family moved way down to Athens, Georgia a few years later. And they really dodged a bullet, because I woke up one morning and saw my hometown on the news, what was left of it. There'd been an explosion at the chemical plant, destroyed the facility, and the fires and chemical spills that followed pretty much leveled half the town. You wouldn't recognize it today. The house I grew up in burned to the ground. I knew someone from high school who worked for the fire department at the time. He told me about how they'd found Jimmy. Jimmy was one of the workers who'd put on protective gear and ran out of the building after the initial blast. Just, as the fire was spreading. From what I heard, they had to identify Jimmy using dental records. He was wearing protective gear, a red jumpsuit with a black gas mask. To their best guess, the fumes from the chemicals had dissolved a seal in his mask. Toxic fumes got in and Jimmy asphyxiated. The fire didn't spread close enough to him to incinerate him, but between the heat and the chemicals, his gas mask and much of the synthetic fibers in his jumpsuit melted, almost like his head had been dipped in black candle wax. He had something in his hands that he clutched up against his chest. It was mostly melted, too. It was a small whiteboard that he'd swiped off a desk or workbench. There was a message written on it. It was hard to make out what was written on it, but my friend, who worked on the fire department, said it looked like he'd written, "Don't cut it down. Don't cut it down. Don't cut it down. Don't cut it down. Don't cut it down. You see, to us, time is just one long, linear push towards some faraway finish line. But to a ghost, time would be nothing. There'd be no tomorrow, no yesterday, just a never-ending now. So yeah, I believe ghosts are real. I believe it because my best friend is one now. Someday, I suppose, I will be a ghost too. So will you.
Hey, I'm Kayla, and I host a show called A Little Wicked. On this podcast, I discuss true crime events such as disappearances, murder mysteries, and, of course, serial killers that are lesser known and also ones that you may probably have heard of. Along with true crime, you can find paranormal lore and conspiracy theories to make you think about the world around you. You can find A Little Wicked on Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, Stitcher, and really anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts. And remember to keep it wicked.
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, well, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
The show really feels like just kicking back with us at home and chatting about monsters and tragedies, but having a few laughs along the way.
Just like we'd be doing if the mics were off, frankly.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts, and on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.
Forever and ever and ever.
Hey, this is Autumn, host of Autumn's Oddities on Darkcast Network. On my show, I talk about murder, cryptids, and ghosts. So you could probably guess that my tastes are a bit on the darker side. So when I shop for unique novelties and gifts, I like to keep an eye out for something with a little bit of, something out of the ordinary. That's why I shop at Bat Wings and Butterflies. Bat Wings and Butterflies is an independent, creator-owned and operated boutique featuring handmade knit creations that run the gamut of the wild and dark side. Here you'll find knit toys and stuffies like little baby Baphomets and giant tarantulas, household knits like blankets, doilies, and water pipe cozies, and much more. Every item is an original work of art, handmade with love by a talented artisan. Order your one-of-a-kind creations today. Find Batwings and Butterflies on Instagram at Batwings and Butterflies. My favorite product is definitely the little baby Baphomet. Oh, look at him. Just go online and look. It looks like he's hailing himself. He's the perfect little demon baby to cuddle with on a cold night while you're listening to podcasts on the Darkcast Network. Go get yours today.
I'm Edward October. For more true, true-ish, and classic tales of horror and the paranormal, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to ring the bell so you don't miss anything. Or find all of our links at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.